Here we go.
Here we go.
It's spring.
It's spring.
Sort of. In Rochester, it's sort of spring. But here at 6 Minute Increments, we like to talk about how we have the interplay between life, the law, and business. And in the springtime, we brought in Joseph Caputo because spring season is real estate season. And Joe, welcome back to the show, actually. This is your second appearance on 6 Minute Increments.
Yep. Happy to be back. Happy that I got invited back for a second round. Happy the first one was a success and that I've been welcomed back for another one.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So it being real estate season here in upstate New York, what's the process that you typically see that people go through and if they're looking to buy a house?
Sure. So the process has been, ironed out over time for the most part. It's been a pretty well structured process long before I got involved. The way that the attorney process works is we usually get a contract from our clients or from a realtor. At that point, usually the contract has already been signed and the parties have already agreed to the most of the terms, which I've always thought is a little strange as the attorney. It's weird to me that clients and people looking for homes don't get their attorney's input prior to signing the contract, but it happens all the time.
Do you think that's a local thing or is that statewide?
I think it's one part. I think it's a statewide thing. It's probably partly the way that the market works is, because we have online listings now, people go and they see a home and then the realtor hands them a contract and says, okay, fill out this contract, make an offer, and then you get the lawyer
And
involved.
it's usually, in a lot of people's lives, the biggest financial commitment
that you're going to make for 30, 50 years.
Do you think people should get a lawyer involved before
I think
they
it helps
sign?
a lot. I think that because a lot of what happens, especially locally, is the market is so inflated around here locally. People are always bidding over the asking price.
Is that still happening?
That happens a lot. Yep. Especially this time of year, especially,
That wasn't always the case. I've been in Rochester long enough to know that, but it's still the case now that people are getting over asking.
Yeah. And so what people do is they waive their inspection rights to the home in the interest of getting into these houses quicker, in the interest of having their bid accepted.
How do you feel about that?
Terrible. And as the attorney, if I'm helping someone draft a contract, I would recommend don't waive your inspection rights. You have to be able to make sure that your couple $100,000 home or whatever you're going to pay for it isn't going to turn into a project with another $100,000 in repairs on top of it that you have to find the funding for.
People are so desperate. Do you think they're just getting emotional?
I think it's a couple things. People are looking, they find a home that they like and they want to get into it quickly. They want to, they've been dealing with landlords or whatever their situation has been for so many years that they're just ready to move into something that they can call their own in a space that they're ready to move forward with as.
This is where my wife and I always differed. The desire to get into a home as a business decision, got to be able to walk away.
Right.
And too often people overpay and then you're stuck still wanting.
Are you mostly dealing with first-time home buyers?
A little bit of both. With our firm, a lot of our client base comes from kind of internal referrals and clients that are kind of already partly with the firm. So we get a lot of trust and estates clients that are looking to sell their homes through their trusts, things of that nature. The buyers are a lot of times looking for a second home. We just helped someone with a hunting cabin kind of up near Syracuse and kind of past a little bit further north of that way. So people are looking for both second homes and first homes. We're helping another client who is buying their first home. They're buying it from a friend. That's always a good relationship to have. Obviously, not everyone's as privileged to be able to buy from a friend's home who is just happening to be leaving the area. But, if you've seen the home before and the person who owns it, you can kind of parse out the details of it. It helps a lot in cutting out the realtor and cutting out the middleman if you can just go directly to the person that you want to buy the home from.
What do you find the lending environment is? I was just at a conference actually, and I saw M&T for commercial rates at least had a pretty significant drop. Are you seeing any changes right now in rates that people are bringing?
Yep, the rates are coming back down a little bit. So a couple years ago, the prime lending rate was very high, and then it has started to come back down.
And you cheat because you were once a banker.
And I was once a banker, so I was underwriting mortgages once upon a time. And so the prime lending rate was pretty high. Subprime mortgage, you were looking a little over 7.5% or so is what most people were getting. Now it's closer to 6.5, that's kind of a lot more.
Is that
reasonable.
quote unquote good, or is that still
That's a lot more reasonable. I mean, if you look at, when people were getting home loans for mortgages, their interest was 2%. That's pretty much unheard of. You get locked into a 2% rate for 30 years. That's pretty excellent.
Yeah.
Versus a first-time home buyer subprime mortgage at 6.5%. That's pretty good. That's not a huge difference. A lot more reasonable is 5 to 6%. That 5% window is probably a little bit better for someone looking to buy a home and stick with it for a long time. But important there is with lending is always making sure that people are looking at their contract for refinance terms. A lot of these mortgages, they have 5 years, no refinancing, but then after 5 years, you can refinance them and you can bring your rate down if the rate environment is more favorable.
What's the reason that the banks put that in place, the 5 years?
Probably just to account for rates and to, so that people don't shop their mortgages around. If somebody sees that they can refinance their mortgage in 5 years and, with one bank and they say, okay, this other bank is willing to offer me a full refinance of this mortgage for a significantly lower rate, I'm just going to refinance and rebuy out my mortgage, go to that bank. So I think it's one part customer retention, I think is what it is for the banks.
What about broker fees? Who actually picks up the broker fees?
Usually, so that's a negotiated part of the contract. Typically, we incorporate it as an adjustment at closing. So we say from the purchase price, we pay out both broker commissions is the idea. And then the way that we typically handle it is we pay the seller, the broker, we pay the seller's broker their commission, and then they split it up and pay it to themselves and the buyer, basically. So we usually try and make sure that our clients only have to deal with one commission fee on there, and then the actual broker has to split it up between themselves, however they negotiate it. Usually the brokers...
So who negotiates that?
Usually the brokers negotiate...
Because they're signing the contract before they come to the lawyers.
Right. So they say, the broker for the fee for the seller's broker is 3%. The fee for the buyer's broker is another 3%. And then you negotiate it from there. A lot of brokers will take 2%, 2.5%. They'll be willing to negotiate it down to an amount around that point.
How often are you getting clients really out of brokers? And is there any difference that you see when a broker is involved?
So two things there. So because of the way that the buying environment is, brokers kind of hold the keys to the door in most of these transactions and situations, meaning that for a client to even step foot into a home that they like, they have to get in touch with the broker. They have to get in touch with the seller's broker. And most seller's brokers won't do business with an individual. They want you to have a broker of your own. So they kind of push people towards brokers. So in that regard, it's a tough spot for people to be in, because maybe you say, oh, I have the knowledge and experience to be able to buy a home without a broker. And then you're going to get stonewalled by the seller's broker because you don't have one of your own. And you're going to have a hard time getting, viewings of homes and things of that nature because you don't have a broker that can kind of facilitate the communication. As far as the difference between having a broker and not having a broker is intended to be that the broker is handling a lot of the things that crop up. You have problems with your mortgage, you have problems between, a point that you already thought was resolved that maybe now the other party you're not seeing eye to eye with them on. The broker's there to kind of help facilitate a conversation between the two parties and make sure that they're kind of on level footing. Which is also what a lawyer's role is.
Yeah, I was going to say,
which is also what the lawyer's role is. The difference being that your lawyer is going to charge you for something like that, right? Whereas the broker is they've already have their commission.
Well, they're getting charged.
They're getting charged, but you have a commission carve out is how they're getting paid. So you're entitled to unlimited time, as much time as the broker's willing to dedicate to you for their commission, versus a lawyer where you're getting charged for all the time that you spent. So the broker's role is really to help facilitate communication and kind of a meeting of the minds to a degree, but that's what your lawyer can do as well. So, do you need the broker? Not really. Is a lawyer maybe a little bit better equipped to have that conversation with the other party, with their attorney, with their broker? I would say probably. But do they serve an important step? Yeah, they help facilitate inspections, things of that nature, access to the home that need to be done. So.
No, you do both residential and commercial. What do you find is the biggest difference between a residential transaction and a commercial deal, which would include buying, a building like what we're sitting in now? Like, what do you see as the difference?
Gotcha. So residential homes, a big part of it is mortgage lending. So most home buyers need to get a mortgage. So a big part of it is what are the conditions that are placed on their mortgage? How do they, overcome a commitment from their mortgage company and things of that nature? The big thing with commercial properties that are different is the due diligence periods and inspection periods that come with them.
What's that?
So due diligence and inspections, you want to be able to make sure that there's no environmental issues at the property, make sure there's no asbestos, lead paint, underground tanks, DEC notices that
What if there are?
Well, if there are, then you need to pay. So then you do two things. You can say to the seller, we have evidence that there's asbestos in this property or lead, paint, or underground oil tanks. We want you to resolve this and remediate this and remove them from the property, or we're going to look for an adjustment because we're going to have to deal with it. If we have a notice from the Department of Environmental Conservation that says that this property needs remuneration because we have a oil tank that's underground that needs to be taken out, then you don't really have a choice. If you want the property, you have to do it. So you kind of negotiate, okay, who's going to pay for this? Is it going to be the buyer once they get the property? Is it going to be the seller in advance of the closing? So that's kind of part of the back and forth that comes in.
How often would a buyer say, well, I don't want to have to deal with that, and then just try to walk away? What kind of seller who says, I don't want to deal with all this and I just want a different buyer?
Right. So the way that we typically handle that is through due diligence. We say that the buyer is free to terminate for things that are uncovered. And then they could say, okay, to the seller, we've uncovered this problem at your property. Mm-hmm. We want you to resolve it. Are you going to do it? If the seller says, nope, I'm not going to do it, then the buyer has the opportunity that through that due diligence period to walk away. That's typically where the buyer would have to make a decision on whether they want to walk away or whether they're willing to undertake the cost of doing the work themselves.
Do you mostly represent buyers or sellers?
A little bit of both. Yeah, we do a little bit of both. It's a pretty good split.
What do you wish your real estate clients knew or would understand
Dark secrets
when using your legal services?
Let's see.
Is there a difference between the residential ones and the commercial ones?
I can guess one difference. I'm guessing the commercial ones have more experience using legal services.
Yep, that helps a lot. They are a lot more familiar with lawyers and how the lawyer process works. Like we just helped someone with a sale a few weeks ago. It got held up for an extra month because we were waiting for an ancient mortgage to be discharged. We couldn't get a title commitment from our title company until we had this mortgage recorded. So it was two things. It was getting a bank that for a mortgage that was recorded in 1992 and paid
Careful,
off.
Joe.
And paid off.
Careful, Joe, how ancient these things are.
And paid off who knows when, but was still listed on the property as not discharged. And it took us an extra month to be able to coordinate with the bank getting this mortgage discharged. And so the clients are understanding that, okay, we want to have a title commitment for this property. Our bank isn't going to let us close on this property. We don't really want to close on this property unless we have a free and clear title. So they're understanding of that. They understand that, they're on a deadline to get their vendors and clients and contracts into this new building. But at the same time, they understand that we can't really do anything without having the right process in place and the right process undertaken. Whereas a residential buyer, they're concerned with when do I get possession of this property? When do I get to leave my current situation and get into my new home so I can start making my new home my home, right?
Do renovations
and get all the work done that I had envisioned when I first saw this place. And they are much less, not understanding isn't the right word, but they're just maybe not familiar with, the undertaking that is required when a title issue pops up or, something.
You talk about title. I mean, for those who don't know, I think a lot of people have heard of it. Mm-hmm. What is title?
Right. So when you buy a property, you get title insurance on it. We go through a couple title insurance companies locally, nationally, regionally. We have a few of them that we work with. What they do is they research the abstract survey and other title documents. Title is, it means the person who owns the property is the fee simple title owner of the property.
So it tracks back who's owned it. And
right. So it tracks.
You actually own this thing.
And it outlines exactly what you're buying, right?
Yep. So it says, here's your survey. These are the exact boundaries of the property that you're buying. You don't own, we have to do boundary line agreements sometimes where the neighbor, has built something onto the other person's property or the old owner has built something onto the other owner's property. And the neighbor has to either come around and say, okay, we're okay with this being here. And the title company will ensure to the fact that the person who owns the property that we're buying owns that portion of the property as well, or at least owns the improvements on that property. And then, so we look at tax liens. So the title insurance looks at tax liens, former mortgage liens, making sure that all the taxes have been paid at the property, making sure that there are no easements or restrictive covenants that are encumbering the property, and making sure that other parties don't have a right to your property that is not disclosed to you and to them, so that if down the road somewhere somebody sues for partial ownership of a piece of property, you go to your title company, you say, I have a title insurance policy from you insured for this person coming for this reason for this property. I need you to defend me in this situation. So that's what your title company does. They defend you in instances where someone is making a claim that they own part of your property.
Now, how about the relationship? I mean, you're negotiating in one direction with the people, the seller, or if you're the seller, but then you often have your own mortgage, or you're getting a mortgage, or you're getting some sort of a loan. What's that process of working with the bank?
So because buyers need the money, they are typically beholden to the bank's terms. It's tough to negotiate your position with the bank very much. There is some room. It depends on the bank you're working with, obviously. But there's some room for negotiation regarding maybe interest rates. You could always look for a more favorable interest rate if you can improve your income, debt to income ratios, loan to value nature, things of that nature. So the answer is that you're more or less beholden to the bank. You need the money.
Well, what's the bank looking to do?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, why does a bank care? Why don't they just hand you the cash?
Okay, so the bank wants to make sure that the property is structurally sound. They want to make sure that
they don't like falling apart buildings.
They don't like it to fall apart the day you buy it. They want to make sure that, the person who gets in there is going to have a property that they can live in, maintain, and pay for the next 30 years, for the term of the mortgage at the very least. So they want to make sure that their investment is well secured, that if this person defaults on their loan and they have to go after the property, they at least have a valuable asset that they can go after eventually. So that's really what the bank's interest is making sure that the value of their loan is well secured and well. That's why when it comes to inspections, you could waive your inspection and say, okay, we don't want an inspection on this property, ready to move forward. And then you turn around and go to your bank and they say, well, we want to have all these inspections done. You have a septic system that is not a public septic system, so we want to have an inspection for that. You have, shoring and basement things that, we want to make sure that the property the foundation is sound, and so you have an inspection for that. And then
sitting here in Webster, New York, I know that the big thing here locally is radon, that almost all the banks will end up making you do a radon test.
Yep. So a big change in New York, at least in the last year or so, is that now properties are required. It used to be that you could give what's called a property disclosure statement. You have to do it. It used to be that the buyer could waive that statement and say, okay, I'll just take a $500 credit on the closing in lieu of this. What it basically does is it kind of is a seller obligation, just a quick questionnaire, probably 30 or so questions. And it goes through the history of the property. It says, when was the roof installed? How long have you owned it? How long have you owned this building? Is there any lead, asbestos? Was there a radon test done? And so the big change was that now that is required across the board. So that just happened in 2024. So to a degree, making people aware of that, making realtors aware of that, banks aware of that.
Buyer beware.
Yeah, buyer beware. It's one of those things that you have to have it now. So if someone is trying to get one over on a buyer and say, oh no, we don't do that anymore. We don't do that. You just get a $500 credit. It's not true anymore. You have to have it.
So, I mean, there is a risk to a buyer if they enter into a contract with no contingencies, no nothing, but then you have to go get a bank, that your bank is going to end up requiring you to still do a bunch of the things that you waived.
Right, exactly.
And what do you do then?
Well, then you say to the seller, okay, I know that the buyer waived this inspection, but our bank is requiring it to close on this loan. So if you want these individuals to close on this and actually proceed with buying this, we're kind of, again, beholden to the bank. We have to listen to what our bank is telling us and what they want. So we have to provide these inspections. And sometimes what you'll do is it may not be grounds for termination. It's not grounds for termination through an inspection of the property. It becomes grounds for termination of the contract through financing contingencies. You say, okay, the buyer has to be able to finance this purchase X amount of dollars at X percentage. And if they're not able to, then we can terminate the contract. So if the buyer can't get financing because their bank has all these lofty inspection requirements that they want to put on the person, then they can't get financing and they terminate the contract. So that's the avenue for termination through bank inspection. versus a financing contingency.
We don't want to eat up too much more of your time, Joe, but is there anything as people go into this spring real property season that you would say to potential first-time home buyers that would be a recommendation?
So a couple things. If the property has sat for years and years and years, that means that somebody has looked at it and there's probably issues with it. If you're asking to be waived inspections on a property like that, definitely get an inspection. It's always good to have an attorney involved and find out who your attorney is going to be before you get into the contract. If we can help you draft a contract with our firm. Our paralegal and I, we're happy to help you do it. And it really helps create an offer that is in your best interest. Even if the asking price is beyond what you're looking for, writing the contract in a way that's most favorable to you is important in these things. Whereas if you're dealing with a realtor, they might be willing to
sell you down the river.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, they're making sure the deal goes through.
Right. A realtor's interest is in closing each transaction.
Right.
You find some good ones out there who are really interested in helping their clients and protecting their clients' interests. But at the end of the day, the realtor, they have a minimal salary and most of their income is based on commission. So their end of the day is that they want each of these homes to close and these sales to close. So you have to always approach the realtor that you're working with that in mind, is that their goal is closing. Your goal is getting into a home that you can live in for forever, however long you want to be.
Unless you really like home improvement projects.
Unless you really like renovations and demoing a home, then it's good to know what you're getting into before you sign any contracts.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much,
Thank
Joe.
you, Joe.
We appreciate it.
Please like, subscribe, share, and come back again.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.